Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we have Olympic basketball to dig into. Giannis in the Olympics for the first time ever, and he looked every bit the two-time MVP. Plus, Jon Horst sits down with Eric Nehm of The Athletic and shares some very interesting thoughts on the Bucks offseason, the core of this group, and a lot more. So we'll get into that coming up next here on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. Free and available wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, Camille, we had the opening ceremonies Friday night. Already time is blurring together here, but we had the opening ceremonies and 2 straight days of some interesting basketball. It started with Giannis and the Greek national team playing Canada Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday morning we had Team USA in their debut here in the Olympic Games. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but we start with Giannis against Team Canada. We talked about the group that Greece is going to be in here as the group of death. Obviously, Canada is in there. You have Spain and who is the other team?
Australia, I believe.
Australia, right. Shouts to our old host and her friend Kane Pittman, who is, by the way, in Paris covering the Olympics. So he has really downgraded since his absence from Locked On Bucks. But look, Giannis looked what you would imagine for Giannis. 34 points, 12 of 15 at the free throw line. It's one of those things that I saw other people in some of the friendlies and group stage getting ready and pointed to, hey, it's a different routine at the free throw line. He's knocking down some free throws. And you file it away and say, okay, I don't know if I'm ready to get hurt again just yet and see a 65% free throw rate in the regular season, but it is at least worth noting, very efficient. It was his Olympic debut. We got to see him as the flag bearer for Greece in those opening ceremonies. And I mean, he looked just what you would expect. I left this game, so Greece lost, not to bury the lead, 86-79. But this was a very competitive game, especially late third quarter, early fourth, when they went on a 10 or 12-0 run to knock that down to a single possession game. The prevailing thought that was you left that was, man, it is really Giannis and a group of Greeks against everyone else. But I left this game wondering, man, is Greece going to advance into the knockout round? Because it's the top 2 teams from each of the groups. And then there's 2 wild card teams, which, as we're well versed on now because of I almost called it the old name, the NBA Cup. Point differential is what is going to go record and point differential in determining who gets those 2 wild cards. But to see Greece hang tough with a team that everybody has touted as one of the best in Canada, I left here thinking, man, is Giannis's Olympic run here going to be longer than we thought?
I think it really could be, just to the point that you mentioned. I mean, going up against Canada, a team that everybody is expecting to give Team USA some real comp, to only lose by 7 to Canada in itself, given the fact that a lot of the guys around Giannis just weren't able to knock down shots, something that I know a lot of Bucks fans were watching and said, this feels a little bit familiar. Some whispers of 2022 against the Celtics there, where it's like, just come on, guys. Giannis is doing a lot.
2022, 2020, 2019.
We can go back. We can go back. But yeah, just like guys have to knock down some shots. And I know I'm not going to act like I'm a big Greece basketball fan, but from what I have watched with the qualifying tournaments and now here in the Olympics, I do believe that their guards can be a bit of streaky 3-point shooters, and it just wasn't their night against Canada in that particular game. Even the free throws from some of their the point guard, Calathes, I believe it was. He missed all 4 of his free throws, which on a night when you're not shooting the ball well as in itself and you can't knock down the free throws as well, it's difficult. It's difficult. But what we saw out of Giannis, I mean, just one of the best performances, I think, so far of the weekend, the early Olympic play here. You mentioned the free throw shooting, which was phenomenal. And even defensively, just seeing Giannis, it was a few times where I saw him like blitzing Jamal Murray on the ball or getting switched onto Jamal Murray one-on-one defensively. And
one very costly one where he was called for the foul. But yes, to your point, those were the things that you watched and you said, okay, are we going to see more of this next year?
I definitely had that thought, but even just seeing his movement, because I know a lot of people are going into this like, just don't get hurt. And I get the nervousness around that. It's going to be there because we care about Giannis, we care about the Bucks, so on and so forth. But just seeing how he was moving, seeing how he just kept going. He was exhausted by the end of the game because we know Giannis knows one speed, but like just his overall play, it was really fun to watch him play and watch him dominate. I mean, Canada doesn't have much height. Yet and still, they put a lot of bodies in front of him, and he kept trying to find unique ways to get around them. And he was really effective in doing so.
So Greece continues their trek through the Olympics tomorrow, and I believe it's like 4 or 5 a.m. Central Time tip. So if you're an early riser, it's no better way to start the day than to watch Greece versus Spain. And as we mentioned, you looked at it on paper as the group of death. It still is a very tough group that Greece is in, but it's not the Spanish team of the past, where at this point, I think the only 2 NBA players on the team are Usman Garuba and Santi Aldama. You still have Rudy Fernandez on the team. Willy Hernan Gomez is on the team as well. But it's not quite to the level of some of those Spain teams we've seen in the past. So this one, to me, is going to be the telling game to see, okay, does Giannis do the same thing? And does Greece win this game to all of a sudden make it very interesting of, okay, they have a chance to sneak through into the knockout round. But just the first impressions, as we mentioned, we talked about it in some of those games that Giannis led Greece to qualify for the Olympics, was just the overall feeling of watching Giannis on a basketball court and how much you were robbed of it and thinking, man, I really missed that in April when the Bucks came up just short against the Indiana Pacers.
I know I did. I was sitting there cheering like I was from Greece myself. I'm sitting here cheering hard for Giannis in Greece right now. But I mean, to the point, they have Spain tomorrow morning. I think it is 4 a.m. Central Time tip off. I have it on my calendar. I'm going to try to get up.
You want to do a live post game?
Oh no. That's gonna be too early. So, but listen, Spain also lost. So they're going to also be coming out with some desperation, just like Greece, because there is this chance to still make it to that knockout stage of this tournament. So it should be a really good game. And if Greece can pull out that victory against Spain, that's the first step in the right direction for them to advance out of the group play.
Yeah, so you win that. You're 1-1. Spain, as you mentioned, would be 0-2. And then Australia and Canada playing each other a little bit later on tomorrow in that group. So look, it's one game. It's the round robin format, so it's not as though Greece is done. I think the big one is going to be Friday when they play Australia. I believe that's another early morning tip for that game. But I'm very curious to see how Giannis continues to look and progress here throughout this Olympic run. Hopefully we get the playoff run. But most importantly, the free throws. And if that's a trend that continues. And look, I get it. We get it. Neither of us profess to be international play experts. I understand the differences and why. Look, you really got to speed up this routine. It's one of the things that is best, I suppose you would say, about international play in general is there's a lot of the stuff that fans complain about. It is gone. Speeding up the game, 4 10-minute quarters. You can't grift for fouls. Those calls aren't there. Even as we saw LeBron James, we'll get to Team USA at the end of the show, take advantage a couple of times where they have the rim rule that you can just knock the ball off the rim once it touches that rim. So there's a lot of components that make this different, but I'm keeping my eye on that free throw shooting for Giannis. And if that is a trend that we see start to make its way to the NBA level.
Yeah, and I will say quickly too before we move on with the free throws and everything like that. Like the FIBA game is normally like the whistle's a little bit tighter. That Greece Canada game had a lot of fouls, way more than what I expected. Yeah. I mean, Giannis's dominance and his will to get to the rim put Canada into some really bad foul trouble with Dort fouling out. I think Powell fouled out, as well as Brooks, which helped Canada or would help Greece at the end in that fourth quarter get it close. Which, as we mentioned, point differential matters in the Olympics. So Greece keeping it close was a big win for them, even though they lost.
All right. So on a weekend where we had Giannis making his Olympic debut, we had a story, I guess, just as big, and that was Jon Horst sitting down with Eric Nehm of The Athletic to talk a little bit about the Bucks off season, going back to last year, his thoughts on really the last 18 or so months. We'll get into the key touch points from that interview coming up next on Locked On Bucks. Before we do that, though, time to talk to you about Game Time. And I've talked about my experience in the past buying tickets elsewhere and then ever since using Game Time. They make the ticket buying experience so much easier, more fiscally responsible, and overall a better experience. Why is that, you ask? Well, they offer last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off when you buy at the very last minute for any event, not just sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Flash deals where you can save even more with in-app exclusive deals on select seats if you're buying ahead of the game or event. All in pricing, though, most importantly. You toggle that feature on, and you know upfront exactly what it is you are paying. No sticker shock and surprise fees once you get to the checkout. Maybe you're on a road trip this summer to take in more Major League Baseball stadiums. You haven't been there before. You want to see what your view is going to look like. Well, Game Time offers that as well. A panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy the tickets. And most importantly, you have the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find that seat cheaper elsewhere. And the purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Camille. Jon Horst caught up with Eric Nehm of The Athletic to talk about a lot of things. So I guess I'm going to start with one of the things that came up in this conversation. And you and I have talked about this before. I feel like we are pretty aligned on the stance that we have, similar to Jon Horst. But in this interview, he reiterated, I would make that trade for Damian Lillard again, even going as far as saying I don't apologize for it. We've gone over the reasons why. I think Jon Horst kind of touched on that as well. But you start off with hearing him say, look, it's a trade we made for these reasons. I would make it again. I understand it didn't work out, but we feel confidently it was the right move to make. And kind of piggybacking off of that, they had more of a head start. We've kind of used that phrase a lot in the offseason, but it was just such a rushed process last year when you acquired Damian Lillard a week before training camp. Jon Horst spoke a little bit about that in some of the moves that they made along the way, and especially in this offseason, were done knowing you already have Damian Lillard on the team. So there's none of that ambiguity in figuring out, okay, how do we make this work now at the last minute? It's, we know we have Dame, we know we have Giannis. What are the moves we can make that put those two in the best position to be themselves?
There were quite a few things that Jon Horst said throughout that interview that just made me, as I'm reading it, go, okay, talk that talk, John. I feel it. Okay, I like the energy. I like the confidence here. And then also, of course, shout out to Eric Nehm of The Athletic. If you guys have not checked out that article, if you don't have a subscription, you are missing out on a lot of great Bucks content. But when Horst was talking about Dame and saying, like, I don't apologize for this at all. One of the other things that he pointed out was just like this particular year that we're getting ready to roll into, this upcoming season. He's saying, like, I think that now we were able to really build out the roster in a way that makes a lot more sense around our superstars, and how he was excited to see what that's going to look like once they hit the court. In addition to that, he also mentioned the coaching staff, the style of play, and the core group of guys who are going to be on this team, where this season, as we're getting ready to enter into, there's just a lot more understanding, a lot more stability of what this team can expect, and how much he believes that this will help the Milwaukee Bucks going forward as well. I mean, he even pointed to the free agent additions of Prince, of Wright, and of Gary Trent Jr., saying, like, these are guys who fit well around what we're looking to do with Dame and with Giannis, and that's really important for this team.
So one thing, to kind of add some more to that point of those 3 free agent additions, before we do that, we see one of the questions asking, what about Brook Lopez? It depends on what side of the fence you fall on with Brook Lopez. You're either going to be very pleased to hear this, or you're one of those that groans and is disappointed. But Jon Horst reiterated, look, we have zero intention of trading Brook Lopez, and even said, I hope he retires as a Milwaukee Buck. And to me, look, it doesn't mean that plans can't change along the way, but it was refreshing to hear, if for no other reason than that was one of the main concerns that I think all of us had. I think everybody was focused on Brook Lopez coming into the offseason. Look, I can't talk you out of it. We've tried, but if you feel like, well, he's old and he's washed and you got to get rid of him, all right, fine. That's your viewpoint. I'm going to disagree with it, but you're welcome to have that. Where we came from was when you kind of looked at not only the market for bigs, but what you could realistically expect to get in return for Brook Lopez. We could not find a way that the Bucks were a better team, a different team, but better. No, maybe you address some help on the perimeter or at a point guard position. Everybody fell in love with it. What if you traded him to the Grizzlies for Marcus Smart? Then the Grizzlies drafted Zach Edey, and that was no longer a need for him. We talked at length about the Houston Rockets, rumored proposals, the Orlando Magic. And in each of those deals, the Rockets one felt like you were somewhat upgrading one spot and getting younger. You were downgrading where Brook Lopez was. Same thing with that Magic deal. If it was going to be, let's say, Wendell Carter, it's a downgrade over Brook Lopez. Maybe not substantial, and he's younger. I get that, and cheaper. But you're a team with vets that, as we've detailed, the window is closing. You don't need to downgrade in any spots at this point. You need to do everything you can to extend the life of this group. So hearing Jon Horst say that, I don't think, and I don't know that Jon Horst would ever answer this truthfully, but I don't think they ever had any intention to even explore deals of, well, listen, I think this was the understanding of, no, this is what helps us be the best team possible, to have Brook as a rim protector in a league that's, again, starting to get bigger, and the Sixers have gotten better. You're going to have to defend Joel Embiid. If you win the East, maybe you play the Denver Nuggets in the finals. You're going to have to contend with Nikola Jokic. So there's just size out there that makes Brook Lopez important. So to me, I was very pleased to hear that of, look, I hope he retires a Buck. And, the way that he worded that, again, we may lose some people here, but it leaves the door open for, no, I understand he is at an advanced age, but when the contract is up, if he wants to play another year or two at a reduced rate, we're very open to that.
Right. And in the article too, he mentioned the fact that Doc Rivers, who spent time with Brook last year, saying, like, Brook holds a lot of value for Doc, and Doc sees that. And for what Doc is looking to do defensively with the rebounding and even offensively. And let me even go back. So I know there's going to be someone out there going, Brook Lopez doesn't rebound. Listen, the team's rebounding numbers are always better with Brook Lopez on the court, because he does his job of fundamental basketball and he boxes out. For those who say, like, well, I wish he could get a couple more rebounds, he's 7 feet tall, I hear you. But the team does tend to rebound better with him out there, because that's a big body blocking off a lot of other bodies. Anywho, but he mentioned that, and just like he does a lot in the spacing that he gives us with Giannis, like how unique that is. And we talked about that as well, too, of like, if you are replacing Brook Lopez, who can give you what Brook does that is able to be traded for. And we racked our minds, we checked the internet, we were doing trade machines, and it was just not a trade out there that gives you the offense and the defense that Brook Lopez does, even with him being 36 years old at this point. And to your point earlier about the team really going in and looking to win, Horst mentioned that as well in the interview of saying, like, we're not out here operating to get under a cap. Like, we're out here operating to try to win games. And of course, if there's an opportunity for us to find ways to, get more flexible financially or make moves to improve the team, of course, we're going to do that. But like, we're trying to win. We are not here trying to duck caps. We're not here trying to shed salary just to do it. We want to win games, and we have a lot of faith and confidence in the roster that we put together. I mean, Horst talking when they just asked, like, you've seen everything else happening in the East. How are you feeling about the Bucks? And he's like, I mean, honestly, like, they got to get on our level. Like, we have been like the winning this team in the East. So like, I feel good about our chances. And again, I said, talk that talk, Horst. Of course, when we get on the court, season starts, we'll see how it all pans out. But I agree with him. With on paper, this team makes a lot more sense than it did last year.
A couple other interesting things that he mentioned. One of those you just pointed out there, the fit of this team and what their intentions were, how he evaluated Damian Lillard in his first season in Milwaukee, and just what was the thought process behind those three signings. So we'll get into that conversation and touch a little bit on what we saw from Team USA in the Olympics coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. So you mentioned that line of the fit of this team, and that's what Jon Horst kept going back to. I think it kind of spun off of how would you evaluate Damian Lillard in his first season here in Milwaukee, and we got a very long answer on, look, it's the same way that we evaluate everything. It's not just looking at the basketball card, back of the card numbers per se. It's looking at everything else, how he grew as a leader, who he worked with, what he came into with a situation, what he dealt with throughout the season, and how all of these things impacted our team. So there was a number of variables we took into consideration, but it all came back to fit. And we know Damian Lillard is a big piece of this team. We've mentioned it before, but I don't think it really gets quite enough mention here of just, in hindsight, it was a pretty awkward landing spot for everyone, for Damian Lillard to be dropped in a week before training camp starts, for the Bucks. Look, do we think the conversations with the Portland Trail Blazers happened that week? No, it was obviously something that went on before that. But still, I would be very curious if you were to inject Jon Horst with a truth serum, checkpoints along the way of the offseason of percentages that you think you have of landing Damian Lillard. And they're going about their offseason with this ambiguity of, we've had these conversations, but who knows where it goes from here. So we just have to focus on what we have now. We detailed the Malik Beasley signing. It makes a lot more sense when he's playing next to Drew Holiday, but there was more to it than that. And that was really the overarching theme of this, was the fit of this team. Is, we mentioned Jon Horst saying, looking at ways to really maximize Giannis and Damian Lillard. And it all boiled down to that final line within that answer he gave of Dame's fit. I think this team makes sense. Will it ultimately win? Who knows? That's our job to figure out, but we're excited about where they're at. And look, as you and I talked about, they are in a much better spot than they were a year ago. With the fit of these guys, each of those three signings are upgrades over who they're replacing. May not be massive, but it's still an upgrade. Now, does it mean that you're on the level of the Boston Celtics or potentially the Sixers or the New York Knicks? That remains to be seen. But I really do think the more you step back from this was about as good of an offseason as you could imagine for the Bucks, for that fit reason, for getting younger, and for upgrading all those spots. And as Jon Horst mentions too, maybe it's a little bit of GM spin, but with all three of those signings, with DeLon Wright, with Taurean Prince, and of course with Gary Trent Jr., I think he's of the most of those three. He feels like we're getting all of these guys in the middle or at the end of their prime and not their past their prime, which, no disrespect, no knock on the other players. That was the case with Jay Crowder. That was the case with Pat Beverly. That was the case with Joe Ingles. That's been the case with all these signings the Bucks have had recently.
Yeah, and it makes a difference. Like he pointed out that in addition to like the age being age appropriate, I think it's the way he worded it. Like we have age appropriate free agent pickups this year. He also mentioned that they're size appropriate and that they can defend multiple positions and they all can shoot, which are all of the factors that Horst and Doc clearly are looking to continue to put around Giannis and Dame on this team. And to your point, just about them making upgrades, they definitely did. And again, they only had minimum contracts to hand out. So like the margin of errors that they had to work within, they really had to be intentional about what they were trying to do, what they were looking to do, so on and so forth. So we are recording this live on YouTube. I saw you just quickly highlighted this, but it was a comment here just talking about Giannis and the health. Like, are people going to start questioning Giannis if they don't make it out the first round again? Because 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, the Bucks all dealt with injuries, and they did. And that's something that Horst mentioned as well. We've mentioned it on this show before. Like, in order to win a championship, you have to have some health luck in addition to just being good. You have to be good, okay, first and foremost, but you also have to have some luck, and health falls into that luck aspect of like, can you be healthy when the playoffs start, when you're trying to be a 16 game player? Can you be healthy at that time? None of us have a crystal ball to be able to say like, yes, this is going to happen when the Bucks get there, but you got to try to do things in a regular season, of course, building habits, building chemistry, getting comfortable with one another, and then also just trying to manage minutes as best as you can, manage injuries as best as you can along the way. One of my favorite answers before that Doc gave out was like, I love my heroes in May and June. I don't need heroes in January.
Yeah.
So just having that understanding of just being like, hey, let's slow it down a little bit here and let's pick it up when the playoffs come. But with the offseason that they had, again, like the Bucks did the best they can. I think that they have upgraded around the board. I mean, I'm somebody who thought the Bucks had a chance to win a championship last year, everything considered, if they were healthy with their top guys going. So if you're just improving around the margins, I love their opportunity to continue to compete for a championship this season as well.
And as we mentioned a number of times last year, it's not to say, look, the Bucks would have beat the Celtics, but I do believe they matched up better with Boston last year than they had in any of the previous years. The tricky part of it was, but it's the teams along the way against Boston, especially if you're not healthy, which it's ultimately going to decide most, if not all of it, is the health. But there were landmines along the way of getting there, which, as we saw, they just never got there. And that point too about if you have another first round exit this upcoming year, that there starts to be some chatter around Giannis of, man, 3 straight first round exits. That's not from any Bucks fan or anybody covering the team on a daily basis, because you understand the variables that are in play, the injuries that, Giannis dealt with, that the team dealt with just about every year, save for 2019 in the first run together. And then when they won the championship in 2021, but it's low hanging fruit to grab at from a national perspective and say, this guy, the 2-time MVP, lost in the first round 3 straight years. That was the point, is that's the conversation that is going to start to take place. And look, I think Joel Embiid already has that. I think he has been under that much criticism nationally. The only way that goes away is if you at least get to the conference finals. So this is a big year for him, and even Kevin Durant. We've started to see that shine come off a little bit. I think you and I talked about this before, Camille. Giannis is in that interesting spot now where we love, as the old adage goes, you love to build up your heroes and then tear them down. We built him up. It was a great story of what he did to, ascend to the heights that he's come from his upbringing and background, and 2 straight MVPs, an NBA championship. But the moment all that happens, then it's all right, we're on to the next thing. And I think that's the phase we're in now with Giannis. But just as we saw with Steph Curry in 2022, you kind of get off of it. And then once they show that glimmer, you're right back on. And I think that's what we're poised for this upcoming season, with a roster that fits better on paper, with those upgrades in DeLon Wright, who Jon Horst, by the way, said was one of their top targets from the onset. It made it sound as though he had better offers, but we were thankful that he was most concerned with fit and my opportunity to win a championship. But the upgrades, year 1.5 of Doc Rivers, year number 2 of Giannis and Dame together and fleshing out that chemistry. I do think they're in a much, much better spot coming into this season than they were last year, even though you had all the hope and hype last season. And in turn, that's only going to project Giannis even more on the national scale of, oh man, this guy should be an MVP candidate. Look at what the Bucks are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I say this all the time, but like real NBA basketball, this isn't NBA 2K where you make a trade and then you just have everything go. Like there are all these other aspects and factors that go into it. But one of my things I loved, Nike has this new campaign out right now. I saw the Giannis one where he's like on a massage bench and he's getting worked out about how much work he puts into being the best. There's a LeBron one as well, where he's saying like, hey, I'm a known winner, but the reality of it is people only care about when your last win was. It's not about how many times you've won before in the past. It's about the next win. So that's what you're really building for. And that's the same mentality that Giannis carries. That's what the Bucks have, because again, it's been 2 first-round exits for them. This is a big season coming up for him. It's a big season for Dame. We had a show, I think last week, about the guys on this team with the most to prove. The everydayers already know about this, but like, it's real. Like this is a big season for the Bucks coming up, and they make a lot more sense on paper. But we won't know anything. Like the people who are saying Brooks washed, people who are saying Dame don't got it, the people, all of these different conversations. It's all going to be answered once they hit the court. But right now we're in the off season. So right now we are just sitting here looking at what's on paper and trying to make sense of how it fits together and what we expect of it. And right now going into this season, the expectations I think are high, but also kind of under the radar for the Bucks, because again, Philly made big moves. The Knicks made big moves. A lot of people are already saying like the Bucks have fallen out of the tier with them and then the defending champion Boston Celtics. So like they're subsequently like under the radar a bit to be a contending team, but also a team that if they do not win in the playoffs, it's going to be a lot of noise around them.
It is, yeah, I mean, it is, you know, as you mentioned the show we did last year on who has the most to prove. I mean, it's the Bucks as a whole. And we even mentioned that on the show of, I don't think there's a team that has this many individual guys that you would put in that category. And obviously the team collectively too, which again is what makes this all the more interesting coming into this season is they upgraded. I don't think there's any disputing that, but teams around them also upgraded. We've seen a few comments of, you know, Bucks are going to be in the middle of the Eastern Conference. And look, maybe that's the case. Maybe a new coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers and no changes means they're going to finish as the Central Division winners. Maybe the Indiana Pacers do. Maybe the Bucks are fighting for a 5 or a 6 seed. Who knows? Because the Eastern Conference got better. And we've had a couple of years where we thought that was going to be the case, and it just wasn't. But I don't think there's any disputing that is definitely the case this season. And that to me, you know, to kind of go back once again to that Steph Curry comparison and the Warriors 2022 title, where it was so unexpected. And a lot of Warriors fans say it's right up there with the first one because of what the team went through and the journey to that title. And you did not realistically expect them to win a championship in 2022. It's not quite at that level for the Bucks, but if you were to reach the finals and win a championship this year, to do it 1 year after, frankly, a disaster of a season and the Damian Lillard trade and a coaching change twice over in a conference that has gotten better, nothing is ever going to replace that second championship for the Bucks in 2021. But I think this one would be knocking on the door.
It'll be sweet. It'll be sweet because once you, again, I didn't know if I would see it in my lifetime. When the Packers won their last Super Bowl, I remember going out and celebrating and being like, man, if the Bucks win one, like I'm going to be inconsolable. Like I'm going to be emotional. It's going to feel so much different because as somebody who is born and raised Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when you see the team that has Milwaukee across their chest, it just hits a little bit differently for you. And then, of course, all the years of watching Giannis when he gets drafted and watching how these Bucks have went from a 15-win team to that championship team. Like that championship that we got in 2021 will always be extremely special. It was 50 years in between those championships. But with everything that has happened since the Bucks won and all of the other chatter that goes around it, and if you're a fan and one, especially online or tapped into sports talk, sports media, you hear a lot of conversations of like, oh, well, like they're only going to get one. And oh, that ring was different because it came off the bubble year and it was a weird timing. And this, like, there's so many people who try to add asterisks to it, where if you can get another one, it just feels so sweet because it's like, well, we did it again. We did it again. You didn't think we could do it the first time here with Giannis, and we did it again. He stayed. We got Dame his first championship as well. Like, that will feel different than that last one. Both will be special, but they'll feel different. It would be like picking between favorite children. Like, which champ? I don't know. I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I know they would both feel really good.
I would encourage everyone. We went over the high level points here, but I would encourage everyone who has not. I would assume our everydayers here have read that interview at least once. That story by Eric Nehm, but I would encourage anybody that hasn't to go back and read it, just to hear some of the insights from Jon Horst, and even him walking through how they evaluate things in terms of team growth and everything else, and what he had to say about each of the signings and the draft picks as well. We didn't touch on that with AJ Johnson and Tyler Smith. So you can find that interview on The Athletic, and obviously well worth your time. Really quickly here, Camille, we saw Team USA win in dominant fashion, but
yes,
the story of that game, which again you'll find no sad Bucks fans over this, was, man, Jason Tatum really didn't play in this game.
Hey, listen, KD had to get his run, and when KD was 8 of 8 in the first half, like, I get it. Like, every matchup's going to be different, but the one thought I'll leave everybody with on Team USA and why this Olympic run is so fun for me: one, the collection of talent. From seeing LeBron and Steph and KD out there, these guys are deep into their careers, hooping at a very high level. But this is what I think everybody always wants the All-Star game to look like, where it's the best of the best competing at a really high level. And that's what makes Olympic ball so fun, because it is the best of America here, and they're really hooping. Like, this is what people hope the All-Star game normally looks like, and it's here. So I'm having a lot of fun watching Team USA. I know the women's team kicks off today. So I'm looking forward to watching that this afternoon as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to have Kevin Durant, probably the greatest scorer in Olympic basketball history that we've seen with America, and LeBron James looking like he does, basically removing any question of who is the best player on this team, is what made it very, very special to see the lead up to it, and LeBron James too as the flag bearer for Team US, for America, I should say. It's look, nothing is going to replicate the first dream team, but this really feels like, man, you got LeBron doing this, Kevin Durant, Steph, like, okay, we're getting to the closest comp we've had in quite some time. Even the sheer fact that Jason Tatum didn't play because of Kevin Durant and LeBron James at that same position. So there is obviously a lot of talent on Team USA here. We got some more shows planned for this week. Not necessarily going to be every day until sometime around mid-September, as we've now kind of hit the dog days of the off season, and not as much to keep you up to speed on. But certainly we'll have shows as it warrants outside of the planned schedule. If there's any news that breaks, if there is for some reason a trade, Jon Horst, what he told us was not the case. We'll have a reaction show to that. Some interviews coming up as well. And I think we mentioned on the last show who the next one is going to be with. So we're still in the process of ironing out a time. I think we'll have that this week, but Melanie Ricks is going to join us here on the show to talk about her role as the sideline and digital reporter for the Bucks, and just her overall story and how she got to the place that she is now, her thoughts on the offseason. So a lot still coming up, and of course some more breakdowns on what we see from Giannis and Team USA in the Olympics, as we are nearing closer and closer to the release of the NBA schedule too. So we'll have a show dedicated to that, the over-unders, and our projections for next season. That'll do it for today, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again on Locked On Bucks.